Well, welcome everybody. For those of you, well, you all know me. I'm Ron. Nice to see you guys. Um, I want to talk about stress, anxiety, spirit, um, energy, a lot of different aspects to what we would typically think of in terms of stress management. So there's tools, techniques, practices, and perspectives. And I'd like to touch on a little bit of each. Struggling gracefully is a concept that I experienced many, many years ago when I was struggling with anxiety and high workload and unpredictability. And this was at a time when I was probably juggling 3 or 4 jobs simultaneously, raising children, a lot of activity, a lot of energy output. And while that was going on, I was also teaching Tai Chi and Qigong and yoga and Reiki and meditation practices and working with clients, many of whom had cancer or were dealing with post-surgical recoveries. So there was a lot of elements, a lot of dimensions, and I found myself reach a point where I just could not do everything effectively. And I kind of crashed, and I needed to figure out, well, what is going on? How do I make this work? And fortunately, I sort of instinctively felt that the principles of Tai Chi would serve me the best, and they did. And for those of you that haven't studied Tai Chi, Tai Chi is a Chinese martial art originally, but Tai Chi is also a philosophy that extends from Taoism, and it's very old. Tai Chi itself is represented by the yin yang symbol and the circle with no beginning and no end. And it just means continuous flow, to go with the flow. And some people will practice Tai Chi as a physical art for many years and maybe experience that flow on occasion. Others will find it right away. It's an embodied experience. Once you embody those principles, you instinctively understand how to apply it to effort, to output, to grounding, to centering, to being present. Tai Chi for me was what I needed the most in order to ground myself, center myself in the present moment in a fluid fashion. Tai Chi literally, well, not, there are different translations to it, but one translation is grand ultimate terminus. And a terminus is like Grand Central Station. It's a hub where all these energies pass through from one direction to another. So I finally experienced that physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually at one point where I just became this vessel, so to speak. And I just allowed the energy to flow through me continuously. I didn't try to stop it. I didn't try to think about it or analyze it. And what I noticed when I was successful at opening myself up and becoming fluid, a lot of the feelings that I felt that were building up inside of me suddenly dissipated. It was like all that internal pressure suddenly just drained right out of my body. And over a period of time, I learned how to direct that flow of energy. So some of the basic principles that we use in Tai Chi are to soften, to have a gentle focus in the eyes, we call an inner smile, to breathe, and to flow. I was talking to someone today, and I was talking about if you don't have a clear direction for flow, flow becomes chaotic. Chaotic does not feel good. It feels uncertain. We can direct energy, feeling, sensation through the body. Now the question is, what direction do we want it to go? And for my practice, as a grounding practice, as a healing practice, the direction is in the force of gravity, down through the body and into the ground. The ground is like a big sponge. And anything that you send into the ground, it will absorb and it will neutralize. And this is a great way to empty your vessel, your body, of a lot of these internal energies and charges that we often associate with emotion, a lot of feeling building up into the body. So if I ask you what's stressing you right now, I'm probably going to hear politics, the election, relationships, um, my job, all those, things that we all deal with all the time. What I've learned is those things can stress you. It depends on your perspective. Now, in the beginning, I said we're going to look at tools, techniques, practices, and perspective. Technically, anxiety and stress are reactions to a perception, an object of attention, so to speak. So if I focus on the narrative of the upcoming election, depending on who I'm going to listen to, it's most likely going to be frightening. If I focus on that frightening narrative, I will embody that at some point. I will personalize that. And then I will begin to react to that narrative as if it were true and happening right now. But the fact is, it is not happening right now. If I react to a narrative that is not immediate in my surroundings, I am reacting with anticipation. And anxiety is anticipatory fear. It's fear of the near or distant future. And this is something that we all do. We all do it. We don't realize that we do it. So now I start reacting to a narrative as if it were happening right now, as if it were true for me, and as if it were a true threat to my being and my existence in the here and now. So one of the first things that we have to determine is the difference between a true threat and an imagined one. And what I have discovered through my own experience and through working with thousands of people over the last 30 years is that about 95% of our stress is us reacting to our own imagination. We are reacting to the scenario in our mind. Now, our body does not know the difference. Our body will accept the contents of our mind as truth. Now, I'm going to speak as an actor. I worked on Broadway for over a decade, and I taught in an acting school. And the premise behind that is to invest in a given circumstance of the play, of the moment, of the scene, as if it were happening now, as if it were true. And the moment you do that as an actor, you have this totally spontaneous, natural reaction, physiological, emotional, psychological reaction, as if it were actually happening here and now. And good actors do that. They just accept those given circumstances, they embody it, they don't question it, they invest in it, and then it becomes a spontaneous reaction. It took me quite some time to see the parallel between being an actor on stage and being a person in life. And what I realized was I was experiencing the same thing. When I was on stage, I was doing it intentionally, consciously, by choice, to invest in these given circumstances and to react accordingly, depending on what the scene is. If the scene was very threatening, I reacted as if it were a true threat. And that, by the way, is very stressful on the body. But as an actor, a conscious actor, we always remember that we're acting. You must always remember that you are acting, that this is not real and absolute. If you do, you will have a psychotic break on stage. You'll lose your perspective. Now, in our daily life, we do this all the time, but we don't do it consciously. And we don't believe that it is a choice. We do it out of habit. We watch the news, we listen to somebody, and we take it directly in, we embody it, and we attach and personalize whatever that story, whatever that narrative is, as if it were true now, and then we react accordingly. And there's no shortage of fearful, threatening scenarios and narratives going on in our lives. It's just bouncing from one to the other and having an habitual chain reaction all day long. And then going, oh, I can't take it anymore. It's too much. I've got to distract myself. I've got to sedate myself in some fashion in order to survive, which I have done. I have done that in the past, which is not a very healthy habit, by the way. And that can lead to certain addictions, such as drugs or alcohol or overeating or overexercising. These are all coping mechanisms to try and deal with that feeling of overwhelm. Are you with me so far? Okay, so now you understand that most of your stress and anxiety is you reacting to your imagination as if it were true right now. One little technique that I'd like to give you right now is to interrupt the cycle by understanding that you always have choice. You do not have to react habitually. You do not have to react as if the given circumstances were happening to you. Now, a lot of us are reacting to the circumstances of our greater world, such as wars going on and the polarization of politics. And yes, there's no shortage of intense events happening, but we always have a choice as to how we wish to perceive, interpret, and react. Perceive, interpret, and react. A way to interrupt the cycle is to say to yourself, is it true? Now, this is a Buddhist technique of challenging the authority of a statement or a narrative or a belief. Is it true? Is it true for me? And then question it. Is that true? And if you keep asking that question, is that true? Is that true? Eventually you realize yes and no. It is not absolute. When we say to ourselves, I can't take it anymore. And I've heard clients and students say this, or say, I can't remember the Tai Chi form, even though I've been practicing it for weeks. And I will say, is that true? And they look at me like, what do you mean, is that true? You're making a statement. Understand the power of language. When you make that statement, I can't take it, I can't remember, whatever that might be, your body, your nervous system accepts that as a command, as if it were true. And if you don't question that statement, you accept it as absolute, and you will react accordingly. I'm afraid of what might happen. Okay, is that true? Is it happening now? No, it's not. It might happen, it might not happen. And we can get into timelines, which are probabilities of outcomes. And that's a whole thing in itself that I'll discuss on another time. But what we often do is we make a statement and then we believe it is absolute. And now we are a victim of our own choice. And I'm using that word specifically because a lot of people will say, I don't have a choice. This is happening to me. You always have a choice as to how you wish to interpret and react to it. Clear? Now, I want to talk about the body as a vessel for a moment. Our body, our nervous system is like a circuit board. And it can only take as much energy as the circuit is programmed to receive and discharge. So when we say, I feel pressure and I feel overwhelmed, I cannot take in any more, you are essentially operating, functioning, and performing as a vessel, as a finite container. So if I have a glass of water and I start pouring water into it, a glass, and I start pouring water, when it reaches the top, it is full. It cannot receive any more. But if I continue to pour water into it, it now overflows and spills over the side. That is how I would describe overwhelm. And this is how most people operate, by the way. They take energies in from other people, from their own reactions, and they get overwhelmed and overflowed very quickly. Their capacity is maxed out. They can't take in any more. And this probably happens to everybody at some point, like in a meeting. You're trying to take it in, and all of a sudden you're saturated, and you say, nope, I can't take in any more. That is the result of functioning as a finite container. In Tai Chi, we transform from a container to a channel. So if I took the bottom out of the glass, I have a tube. And if I pour water into the tube, I can pour water into it endlessly. I will never overflow. I will never reach saturation and overwhelm. That is the principle of being grounded, centered, and fluid on a continuous basis, moment to moment, breath to breath. And now we can understand that and apply that without having to learn the complex form of Tai Chi itself. We can do that simply by imagining, intending, and breathing. Clear? So now I want to give you a little tool. It's like a meditative practice. When you feel stuck, when you feel tense or reaching your saturation point of overwhelm, understand that you are acting as a finite container, and you can choose to become a fluid channel anytime you wish by making a conscious choice. And that's one of our superpowers, is that we can choose how we wish to be. This is about embodying an archetype, like a character that you play. And you can play the container or you can play the fluid channel. So when you get to a point where you feel rigid, tense, or anxious, that is a clear signal that you are in resistance. You're not in flow, you're in resistance. You're fighting it, and you're fighting yourself. So here's a simple meditative practice, and we do in multiples of 3. On one breath, you're going to breathe in and say to yourself, one breath as you breathe in. At the top of that breath, say, I feel, and just acknowledge whatever you feel and accept whatever you feel without judgment or expectation. So that's one breath at the top. As you exhale, you say to yourself, I release this feeling and flow. Breathe in one breath. At the top of the breath, I feel. As you exhale, I release this feeling and flow. Again, breathe in one breath. I feel. Exhale, I release this feeling and flow. This is very simple. It is profoundly powerful because what you are doing is retraining yourself. You're retraining yourself from unexamined habit to conscious choice. And that is the basis for transformation. Healing is a transformation from one state to another. Becoming a fluid channel is a transformation from a container to a fluid state, from stasis to flow. And this is the essence of Tai Chi. As a martial art, one of the prime rules of Tai Chi is do not oppose or resist. So we have a wonderful practice called Tui Shao or push hands, in which we connect wrist to wrist with another person, and we just apply a little bit of connection and we start moving in sort of a figure-8 pattern. And the goal is to sense and feel that connection and receive that person, ideally without judgment or expectation. That's the biggest challenge. What often happens is when you connect to a person, your internal defense mechanism kicks in and you tighten up because you perceive this connection or the energy of this person as some threat of some fashion. To receive a person that close is a very intimate thing to do, which means that you are opening yourself to let their energy into you. Now, this is another source of stress that a lot of people struggle with but don't understand why. They're taking in the energy of those around them and holding it. They are not letting it go. And this is a pattern that many people develop in childhood. This is a child's mind saying, I'm going to be a helpful person and I'm going to try and take some of the pain and the suffering away from mom or dad or my best friend. Because we don't know what else to do. We don't have any other tools as children. And if we're at all sensitive or empathic, we realize, hey, give some to me and maybe I can lessen your burden. It's a belief, but it doesn't work at all. And I'm saying from my own experience. That's how I functioned as a child. I had an ulcer by the time I was 5 years old because I was taking in all of this energy and holding it in and then identifying with it as my own. And I'm a child of 5 and I am having all these adult feelings and images and reactions that I do not understand, but I don't know any other way to protect myself. And I've talked to a lot of people in the last few weeks that did not realize that they were doing this as a habitual defense mechanism. It's a way to sense danger. I got very good at sensing a threat as a child, but I became hypervigilant all the time, 24 hours a day. I could sense the energy of my parents or my brother, and I could sense subtle shifts, like when they were suddenly displeased or frightened or angry. And being that sensitive, taking that in, I would then jump into action and say, here, let me help you. Let me circumvent the inevitable threat that's coming in. And this is an old pattern that a lot of people, even as adults, still hold on to. In Tai Chi, it would be the equivalent of having somebody apply a little pressure and then you tightening up, you bracing. And bracing is a defensive reaction. It's effective in only one circumstance. When we armor ourselves physically by tightening up, that is only effective at the moment of a physical impact. Understand? Holding on to that continuously is not helping anything. What it's doing is wasting your energy, and you're going to get exhausted pretty quickly. Make a tight fist and hold on to it for a minute. Tighten your whole arm. You're going to tire yourself out in less than 20 seconds. So Tai Chi understands that we need to preserve our center and our energy, not through resistance, not through opposition, but by letting go and letting it flow. So if a person pushes on me physically, The more I relax, the harder they can push, and it doesn't feel like I'm receiving much at all because I'm letting it flow through my body and I'm directing it into the ground. It seems like magic when you do this with another person. You're pushing on them and they're completely relaxed. You can check their muscles, they're completely soft and they're tiring themselves out. And you're like, yeah, I don't feel anything. But the moment I tighten up, that energy is going to build up in my body instantly. I will become solid, rigid, overwhelmed, and most likely get thrown off balance. That is one of the core principles in Tai Chi. The best way to understand it emotionally and psychologically and energetically is to experience it physically because we're physical beings. So I can tell you all about it, but if you haven't experienced it, it's probably not going to make sense. So one thing that you can do is ask a partner to just, you're going to hold your arms out like this. They'll apply a little bit of pressure on your wrists. And with your knees bent, try to relax and just let it flow through your body and down into the ground. Now, at the same time, you have to direct the energy through the body and into the ground with your intention and your imagination. So if I say to myself, one breath, I release this feeling and flow, where do I want it to flow? I want it to flow with the force of gravity down and out into the ground. Soften, smile, breathe, and receive, whether it's coming at you this way, or from above, or from behind, or even from inside your own mind. Direct it down and out into the ground. So now, here's another little tool for you. Just sit up, soften your focus, breathe. Soften, smile, breathe, and receive. Say that 3 times to yourself. Soften, smile, breathe, and receive. Soften, smile, breathe, and receive. One more time. Soften, smile, breathe, and receive. Now imagine the force of gravity coming down like a waterfall, flowing through your body. It goes over and around your body, but it goes through your body as well, out through your feet into the ground, and continues to flow deep into the earth. Soften, smile, breathe, receive, direct the flow down and out. You are in command of that direction, of that energy. Now, keep breathing and keep the image moving. It's not a snapshot. It's not a one-time picture. This is moving pictures. This is continuous. One way to do this is as you breathe in, imagine the energy coming in through your head to your heart. As you exhale, send it from your heart out through your feet. Don't think, don't analyze. Focus, imagine, intend, and breathe. Breathe in and receive. Exhale and direct it down and out. Keep it going. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Have that image flow through your body continuously. Now, this is something that you have to practice. The more you practice, the clearer and more specific the imagery will become, the easier the practice becomes. When I imagine the waterfall flowing through me, I give it color, texture, temperature, sound, as much dimension as I can imagine. And those images can change moment to moment, as long as they're moving, as long as it is fluid, and as long as you are breathing. You have to breathe continuously. That is becoming fluid. The moment you hold your breath, you freeze. Your energy freezes. Your mind freezes. The emotion locks into the body and does not release. The breath is the primary tool that we use in all of these healing practices, all these meditative practices, to become fluid, grounded, and present. If you are aware of breathing, you are more present than when you are not aware, because you can only breathe in the present. You can't breathe yesterday or tomorrow. You can only breathe in the present. That's a function of being a physical being. That is why we use the breath as that object of attention. And there's 100 different ways to use it. And there's limitless ways of imagining and intending. If that image doesn't work well for you, find one, create one, so that you can activate it immediately on the first breath and continue. Now, this is a meditative practice. I soften, smile, breathe, and receive, channel, and direct out into the ground. Once that stream is flowing, you can pour into that stream any thought, any feeling, any image, any intention, and imagine it flowing with the stream out of your body. Going back to my friend who was in the hospital, she was allergic to painkillers, but they had to open her up from the bottom of her ribs down to her hip and remove cancerous tissue. And because she was allergic to painkillers, they gave her an epidural, which only numbed the wound site from the navel down. From the navel up, she was feeling the full intensity of that surgery. It was intense. I gave her the same imagery and intention and breathing that I just gave you. And because she was able to do that with the breath and visualize it clearly, the energy, the pain, the sensation had somewhere to go and exit out of the body. And it did. And she fell asleep. I had a client come to me one day to my office who had the beginning of a migraine. And I just said, sit there for a second. Let's do this little technique, this little practice. Soften, smile, breathe, receive energy, let it flow through the body out. That migraine never increased and it dissipated in about 5 minutes. And he was shocked. It had never happened before because he did not believe that he had the ability to take command of his energy. His experience was migraines come and I'm a victim. I can take my meds, but I got to lie down until it passes. Or you can take charge of the feeling, the sensation, the energy, and give it direction down and out of the body. I've done it many times. I woke up one morning with a pain in my knee that was so intense, I thought I injured my knee in my sleep. And I was wondering how did I do that? And I started to move my knee and I realized, well, I didn't tear anything. I went into that flow and within a few seconds, my ankle was hurting. My knee was fine. And then I was thinking, what did I do to my ankle? Nothing. I'm directing the energy from my knee to my ankle. Now I just need to keep it moving out. And I just sent it out my foot to the wall, from the wall down the floor. Within a few moments, it was gone. It's a technique for taking command of your focus, your intention, and your energy. And now I want to talk a little bit about the difference between command and control, because most people don't understand that there is a difference. We often use those terms as if they mean the same thing. From my experience, they are very different. The essence of control is the attempt to stop something, okay? So my son was about 2 or 3, yeah, I think it was 3. We were walking down Broadway and it was a nice day. And all of a sudden he just can't take it anymore and he starts to have a fit. And he's lying on the sidewalk, just, letting it out. And this woman came walking by and looked at him. She was horrified. She looked at me And she said, "Oh my God, can't you control your child?" And I just said, "Go right ahead, be my guest." And she looked at him and she knew there was no way she could control him because we can't. And she just sort of went, "Oh my God," and she walked away. Well, it only took about a minute for him to discharge all that feeling, all that energy, send it into the ground. This is instinctive. Every kid knows how to do this. When they have a tantrum, they stomp their feet, they fall to the floor, and they send it into the ground. We all knew how to do that as kids, right? And there are different ways of doing that. So that's an example of discharging all of that intense feeling and energy out of the body with a clear direction down and out. And after about a minute, he's looking up at the clouds and he's completely fine. And I said, "Okay, when you're ready, we can, walk on." And he got up and we continued walking. So the point is that we learn how to resist and hold all these feelings in. I think of feelings, emotions as energy. It helps me to depersonalize it because it's not who I am, it's what I am experiencing. If I'm angry, I'm experiencing the energy of anger. I am not anger. I'm embodying anger. And by realizing that, I can command it. I can send it anywhere I want to go. Now, understand this. The safest direction is down and out into the ground. The ground will absorb it. If I send it out into the room and you're in the room, you're going to receive it. You will absorb it and it'll make you angry and you're not going to want it. And you're going to want to send it back to me. And that is the cycle of drama. It's like playing hot potato. I don't want it, you take it. And we just keep cycling it back and forth until someone says, "We don't need to continue this drama in this way. I am going to ground it. I'm going to send it down and out." And that's the end of the cycle right there. I had that happen to me with my family once. We were sitting at the dinner table and everybody was arguing, passing it around, and I just turned into that fluid channel, sent it down, and everybody calmed down because we were not continuously passing it around to each other. It had another direction to go and flow down and out. How are we doing so far? Okay. So let's go back for just a second. One breath, I feel. I release this feeling and flow down and out. Combine that with a image of energy, gravity. It's flowing through us anyway. You might as well open yourself up and let it pass through you. As it does, with your imagination, with your intention, you can empty your vessel very quickly, very easily. Clear? Now, you can shorten that to I breathe, I feel, I flow. I breathe, I feel, I flow. And combine that with the image of the waterfall flowing down and out. Years ago, when we used to live in my old neighborhood, we had a contentious relationship with my downstairs neighbor who smoked. We would get the smoke in our apartment. Our kids would run around. She would complain they were too loud. We didn't like each other too much. One day I'm coming out of the building, she's coming in, and she just launches into a tirade. She starts screaming at me about the noise coming down. And I immediately felt myself tighten up. I armored myself, and then I had the realization that wasn't going to help, so I just let it go. I started breathing, and I imagined that flow going right through me into the ground. And in less than a minute, she went from like 11 down to 1. She went from screaming to talking in a normal voice. And then she looked at me and she said, "It's so good to talk to you." And she went into the building. I did not say a word. I didn't have to. What I needed to do was take command of the energy. of the intention, of the flow. That was Tai Chi. I defended myself successfully with Tai Chi. Didn't have to touch, didn't have to bounce it back, did not have to resist. When someone's attacking you emotionally and psychologically like that, try it. Just become the stream. Don't try to change them. Don't try to stop them. They are downloading, and they're downloading into you. Now, if you are going to act as a finite container, you are going to become a garbage can for whatever crap they are throwing at you. And you will fill up very quickly. And you will feel overwhelmed and pressure and tense. And most likely you're going to want to attack back. And that's where the drama comes from. Understand? If you decide to transform from a container or a trash can to a channel, it doesn't matter how much they throw at you. If you keep it moving, you keep breathing, you direct it with imagery and intention, they're going to lose steam very quickly. I've done it a dozen times since then, very successfully. Is it easy to do in the heat of the circumstance? No, because your reflex, your habit's going to kick in, and you're going to want to defend yourself and push back. But I'm saying there's another way to go. Now, that's an example of dealing with the stress of someone else's energy that's attacking you. Apply that to yourself, and remember that you're reacting to your own imagination as if it were true. And you're holding all that energy and feeling in your container. And now you feel like you're going to explode or pass out. And some people do. They just shut down, boom. That's their way of dealing with it. That's one way to go. But if you're in an actual situation where you need to stay awake and stay present, that's not going to be very effective. So this is not going to happen right away. This is why we call it a practice. You have to apply this constantly. One of my meditative practices is to sit or stand or even walk and just soften, smile, breathe, and gently express whatever I'm feeling out of my body into the ground. Here's the rub. You cannot try to analyze it. This is not something you think about. This is something that you feel and direct. If the moment you go into your head to figure it out, why am I feeling this feeling? You're going to stop the flow. We are multidimensional by nature. Our body is one dimension. Our emotional body is another dimension. Our mental body is another dimension. Our imagination is another dimension. Our spirit, our soul, other dimensions. We need to bring them all together in the same place at the same time as a fluid channel. One of the things that I often talk about in my class is fragmentation. And fragmentation is when the mental body travels away from the present of the body. And we do it all day long. We go into the past, we travel into the future, and then we start reacting to whatever we're imagining or creating, but we're not fully integrated, we're not fully present. So we fragment all the time. And I see people do this. I mean, they're walking down the street like this, looking at their phone. They are fragmented. They are not fully present. And this is one of the problems with our technology. It's easy, it's a distraction, but what you don't understand is you are creating a state of disempowerment when you fragment. The idea is to bring all of those bodies in alignment, in the present, through the breath. The fastest way that I learned how to do that is the next tool I want to give you, which is breath center, ground, and space. Breath, center, ground, and space. Now, these are 4 objects of attention and intention, of awareness. I'm going to take one breath in, and on that breath, I can easily be aware of the feeling of breath coming into my body. I can be aware of my center line of my body. I can be aware of the ground beneath my feet and the space that I am currently in. Breath, center, ground, space. This is a mantra to get you to integrate and align all of your dimensional bodies in the present space and time. It's not that difficult. Now, there are different ways you can do it. You can breathe in and say to yourself, breath, center, ground, space. Keep your eyes open, by the way, because if you close your eyes, you're going to disconnect from your physical environment. Okay? You have to take in your physical environment. Now, this is really key. You're looking at your computer right now, but use your peripheral vision to observe the space around you that you're in and breathe. Just take 30 seconds. Soften, smile, breathe, and be aware of feeling your breath, your body, the ground, and your space. Is there any true threat in your immediate space right now? And there might be, but it doesn't look like it. Okay? If there is no true immediate threat in your current space, power down. Let go of that bracing, of that armoring, of that habitual defensive reaction. This is what I meant by being able to discern the difference between an imagined threat and a true threat. A true threat is to your physical well-being right here, right now. And yes, we can say, you know, there are elements at play that are threatening to me, but not right here, right now. You have to be able to acknowledge that if you're going to be able to adapt as a fluid, creative, multi-dimensional person to all the changes that we are experiencing. And that's another topic of conversation. Breath, center, ground, space. I used to have panic attacks on the subway every day, several times a day. And when I say panic attack, I mean full blown, heart beating out of my chest, sweating profusely, get me out of here. But I couldn't because I was stuck on the train. And it was just unbelievable. So many years of this, it was exhausting until one day, and I remember it so clearly, I'm standing on the platform and I'm feeling fine. The train comes, I get on the train, I'm feeling fine. It's not even crowded. And everybody's just sitting, everybody's relaxed. And then I think, what if I have a panic attack? And I trigger a panic attack in about 3 seconds. And boom, 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 here it goes. The difference in that moment was I was able to see how I started it myself. And I had the sense to say, hey, 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 I just created this. I can create something different now. And I'm going to go into breath, center, ground, and space as a fluid stream. And I'm going to take this energy that I just created out of thin air and send it down into the ground. I had to stand up and I started riding the subway like a surfer, which also made me focus on being present because I had to balance. And within 10 seconds, it was gone. And it was the first time that I had neutralized a panic attack in my life. And I was already in my 50s. That's a long time to deal with that one. And so I couldn't believe it. I just thought, did I do that? Did I really do that? Let me see if I can do it again. What if I have I didn't even have to finish the sentence and it started over again. I started to get a panic attack. And I had to go back and go breath, center, ground, space, breathe and flow, and it went right out of my body. That was my hallelujah moment. I was like, oh my goodness. I did not realize that one, I was the author of that habit of creating it by focusing on what if scenario. What if in the near future, I have this experience that I've had thousands of times before. The moment I start projecting away from the present, I begin to fragment. I lose my integrity and my alignment, and all hell breaks loose. So let's put it all together. In Tai Chi, we learn how to align our head, shoulders, hips over our center of balance, our foot. Okay. And we develop that balance by keeping the knee bent and staying in that position and moving from foot to foot very slowly so that we can sense the transfer of our center of physical gravity from one foot to the next. But it also develops strength in our root, in our legs. And over time, we get stronger. We build tolerance and endurance, not just for physical balance, but for staying in alignment in the present moment. That is the core of the practice, not to reflexively fragment into 100 pieces and then have a panic attack or lose all sense of stability, which is what many people do. They get fragmented and thrown off balance so quickly, so frequently. And of course, if it happens all the time, you're going to develop a narrative about it. You're going to develop a belief about it that you don't have any control over it. The paradox is you don't need to control it. You need to take command of your focus, your intention, and your energy by bringing the pieces into alignment. Breath, center, ground, space. Breathe, I feel, I flow down and out into the ground. That in itself is a very powerful practice for cultivating the ability to ground yourself, to balance yourself at will, on demand, and especially under pressure. At will, on demand, and under pressure. We all have this ability. We just don't have the practice or the training for it. Clear? Any questions about that?
I do have one question.
Yes.
I think it might be, you said you started riding the subway like a surfer, and I wonder if you meant that in the sense of like a surfer rides a wave, or as if you were, was it an
Both.
image?
I didn't hold on to the rails. I
I
had to
see.
balance while the train was moving. And to do that, you have to bend your knees and you really have to relax. And you have to drop your attention down to your root, to your feet. And it's a constant shifting. Balance is a constant shifting. It's not static. So just like surfing a wave or surfing the train inside the train, not on top, as some kids do, um, it's about having an awareness of being in your body as fully and as um, integrated as you can, moment to moment, breath to breath. And it's dynamic. It is fluid. You don't know how the train's going to move. You have to feel it. When I'm doing push hands with a person, I don't know what they're going to do. I have to feel them. If I think I know what they're going to do, I'm wrong. And I learned that one when I was first started studying Murukan Tangsuro. I was fighting a black belt and he just dropped his hands down and I thought I got him. And in the moment I thought I got him, he brought his foot straight up and straight down on top of my shoulder and knocked me to my knees. And while I was on the floor, he looked at me and he said, just when you think you have me, you don't. You don't. And my thought was, how did he know what I was thinking? He didn't know what I was thinking. He knew I was thinking. And when we think, the flow stops. Now, we can get into a fluid state where we can observe thought, where we can process continuously and stay fluid. But that takes some training and some practice. For most people, they get into a flow state, and the moment they think, they stop. It's like walking down the street behind somebody, and then they freeze, and their head goes up. And then they figured out whatever the thought was, and then they start walking again. Do you have to stop in the middle and create a traffic jam? Because that's what happens internally when you stop to think. How much do you need to think? Now I'm talking as an actor on stage or as a performer of any kind, musician, dancer. If you think too much in performance, you get tight. You disconnect from the flow. And so we learn not to overthink. We learn to feel and flow. And whatever it is we're doing, we just have to direct the feeling into the action. And that's the flow state or the peak state that we associate with peak performance. Look at any professional athlete. They look effortless. They are in flow. They're not thinking. They're sensing and they're feeling, and they are making micro choices moment to moment, breath to breath. If they stop to think, they'd stop breathing and their body would lock up. And I'm also talking as a martial artist who has sparred with hundreds of people. Every time I stopped to think, my body would freeze and I'd get hit or pushed off balance. So part of the process is learning to let go of your intellect. And that's a real challenge because we are conditioned from early on to value our intellect above almost everything. That's what school is training us to do, to master the art of memorizing and test taking and building all of that knowledge through the intellect. What about experiential learning? That's what Tai Chi is. When I would teach a new semester, a lot of students would come up and say, any books I should read? And I would say yes and no. I don't want you to read anything, at least till the end of the semester, because if you start reading about Tai Chi, you're going to intellectualize it. And you're going to be thinking about all the things that you read while I'm trying to get you to feel it. Clear? Any other questions? Here's something I want to point out. Often in that context of Tai Chi class, we would stand in what's called embrace the tree. It's a meditative posture in which you're just standing with your knees bent, focusing on your center, breathing. Ideally, you should have an image of energy flowing easily and effortlessly through the body. Otherwise, you're going to get tense and start shaking uncontrollably. It's a way to get you to bring your mental body and anchor it into the physical body, moment to moment, breath to breath. Now, an interesting thing happens. When you reconnect into your body in the present moment, you suddenly become aware of what is present in the body. And that can be all of these feelings and energies that you have been resisting, containing, and holding on to. And all of a sudden, you become aware of it. And if you don't know how to take command and direct it out of the body, you instantly get overwhelmed. And I can see it in the face because they'll be like this, and all of a sudden their eyes are darting around like, get me out of here. But they're not allowed to leave. They have to stay. They have to feel. Acknowledge, accept, and allow whatever you're feeling without judgment or expectation. That is the beginning point. That's your starting point. If you want to transform from one state to another, from tense to fluid, from angry to calm, from sad to joyful, you must be able to acknowledge, accept, and allow what is present first. Only then can you take command of what is present and direct it in a direction down and out, empty the vessel, and then focus on what you wish to embody. Now that's acting, but that's also Tai Chi. Clear? Any comments or questions? I know it's a lot. Are we okay? Let's go back to just breathing for a moment. One breath, I feel, I release this feeling and flow. Don't think, just breathe and feel. One breath, I feel, I release this feeling and flow. One more time. One breath, I feel, I release this feeling and flow. And now shorten it to, I breathe, I feel, I flow. I breathe, I feel, I flow. Bring in the waterfall image and intention. I breathe, I feel, I flow continuously down and out into the ground. I breathe, I feel, I flow continuously down and out into the ground. I breathe, I feel, I flow continuously down and out into the ground. I don't need to analyze what I'm feeling. I just need to direct it down and out so I can clear my mind, calm my heart, and balance myself. Simple and effective. Any questions? So that was an introduction to a perspective of stress as energy, of how we function, operate, and perform as a multidimensional being, not just a body or as a brain, as a lot of people often try to process their experiences in a very small dimension. Like they just want to figure it out mentally, or they just want to express it emotionally, or they're going to go and work out physically. And in that process, they will discharge a lot of that energy and feel calmer. But it's often a cycle. I resist, I invest in these fearful narratives, I identify with it, I react to it as if it's a true threat right now, and I fill up so quickly, and now I'm in overwhelm, fight, or flight. And of course, when you're in that state, it often leads to high anxiety and often panic. And I'm speaking from my own experience. When you're having a panic attack, it is really difficult to remember anything. It's really hard to remember that. So this is why, as a martial artist, we train every day to instinctively respond to a true threat without thinking. If somebody is attacking me, I can't think and I can't stop to think and say, well, how should I handle this? If I've practiced enough, my training kicks in. And I respond by letting go, by opening, by receiving and redirecting, or by running away. If you can't avoid, evade, escape, run away. And that means also having healthy boundaries when dealing with negative and toxic people and experiences. That's a whole nother thing that we can talk about. So I hope you found this helpful. I also want to say that I'm going to be starting a series of classes 3 days a week. Tuesday morning, Wednesday evening, and Thursday morning. And right now, Tuesday morning is service and community. And so people that feel like you want to be of service in the world, but are not quite sure how to do that, this is a place to figure it out, to come together with other people who are also looking to develop that. If you know what your service is and want to deepen it that's a space for that as well. Wednesday evening is going to be devoted to tools and practices, and I have many, such as detachment practice, timeline practice, meditative practices. Um, we can get into Qigong and we can get into very simple Tai Chi as well. Depends on where we are and what's going on, what we need. And then Thursday morning is about healing and transformation. And this is from an energetic perspective, from a spiritual perspective. These are things that I've taught for many, many years, but not within that context specifically. Um, Many of you know that I've had an 18-month journey, a spiritual journey of activation and expansion, which has enabled me to fully embrace that dimension of myself as a healing priest, as an energetic guide and teacher. And so now my goal is to be of service by offering all of these tools, all of these practices, and looking at it from different perspectives. All of those classes are open. If you wish to donate in any fashion, you can, but they are not, it's not a requirement. I just want to make this available because that is my service and it's an exciting thing for me to offer because I'm expanding it. I'm creating a lot of different entities and opportunities for many people all over the globe right now. I have people all over the planet that I'm working with on creating their own interesting ways of being of service. And it's something that ultimately I would like to bring all of those people together into a community of support, a community of unity, service, and light. That is my goal. So, non-religious, no dogma. This is really a spiritual, energetic perspective. We can talk about anxiety and stress in specific situations during those times. I've got quite a bit to offer. I will send an email out and I will post it on social media. I would like to get it going very soon, maybe next week. I know people will probably need it based on what's going on. And then there will just be those links that you can join in at any time you're available. Yay!
I'd just like to
And you're
say
right.
that I'm amazed that this was just an introduction. I
Yeah.
decided to take notes and um, the time went by so quickly, but it got to a point where my hands started cramping and I saw all I had written. And I
Well,
don't
I did
just,
record it, so you won't have to worry about it.
you're right, you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, just you said very insightful stuff, and having taken your class before and heard some of these principles years before,
Hmm.
it's
Well,
nice to come back to them with a new
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm so excited for my students that have worked with me in the past, some of which I haven't heard from in a decade or more, are coming back because it's something that's useful and I think it's really needed at this time because we are going through some big changes and it's going to continue. And these are effective tools to help us deal with all of that.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share your insight.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you,
Very
Ron.
much.
Thank you, Ron.
You're most welcome. If you guys have any questions, email me. And if you want to book a private, like one-on-one, we can do that as well. Well, thank you
Thank you,
all
Ron.
Thank you,
for
Ron.
joining.
Seeing you.
I hope this was
I've
helpful.
missed you.
Yeah,